Lance, thanks a lot. I guess, well, we're not done with you totally yet, but Zeki was on that.
Okay, well, we're going to move into talk about another minority, Arabs, my favorite minority. So, really quickly, when I mention the word Arab or Muslim, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I promise I'm not going to judge you. I really want to know what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear Arab or Muslim.
War.
War, okay. What else?
Terrorist is a stereotype.
Terrorist, stereotype, okay. What else?
Repression of women.
Repression of women, okay. Anything else?
Oil.
Oil, all right.
T.E. Lawrence.
I'm sorry?
T.E. Lawrence.
T. Lawrence, all right. Okay.
Probably highly morally principled, like the not terrorist Muslims. There are a lot of them who are in this school.
A lot of them were, I'm sorry. You said? I didn't hear you.
Religiously conservative sort of Muslims.
Conservative, okay. Great.
Every headline from this past week's news.
Every headline, okay.
Numbers.
I'm sorry?
Numbers.
Numbers? Oh, okay, Arabic numbers, yes, absolutely. That's the first positive thing I heard. I like it. Thank you.
They're not the same.
Which ones?
Arabs and Muslims aren't the same.
Well, I realize this. Okay, I'll make this distinction. Not all Arabs are Muslims. Most Arabs are Muslims. The vast majority of Arabs are Muslims. However, there's a sizable Christian population in Arab land, especially in Lebanon, where it used to be. Now the majority is Muslim again because they've all fled. But yes, there is a distinction. Anything else?
Rumi.
I'm sorry? Rumi. Okay, yes, absolutely. Good poet. So, what I want to start with here, I want to talk about a little bit about the treatment of Arabs and Muslims. I know they get lumped into one category sometimes, but the treatment of that in Hollywood, because Hollywood doesn't really differentiate between Arab or Muslim for the most part. There is an example I will give that shows you a really, really good Hollywood movie that takes in all the complexities of the issue. And it's always the exotic Arab. There's the belly dancers. There's the people with really big swords that come after you. There are a number of films. Harem Scarum. Anybody know that movie? Elvis, right? So there's Samson and the Sheik. You know, these are all movies from the 50s and whatnot. The same exact stereotype, which is the desert people. Then oil started coming out. Somebody here said oil. Did you say oil? Or somebody said oil. Yeah, you did, right. So then oil was discovered, and all of a sudden the representation of Arabs were the rich oil people. Okay, so there is one clip I want to show. This is, let's see, Cannonball Run 2, not 1, 2. This is fantastic, all right? So the only positive thing I think about this clip is the guy who's playing this character is actually Arab. It's our favorite Jamie Farr. Everybody know Jamie Farr? I love Jamie Farr. I met Jamie Farr in New York when we were doing a festival called the Arab American Comedy Festival. And we were honoring him with an award. And he came and he told probably the worst joke I've ever heard. He tried to tell us a joke that would appeal to Arabs, and he would say an Arabic word and an English word, and it fell so flat. And after it was like silence. And then a couple of people went, just do like a piece. It's like, oh, Jamie, what are you doing to me? But anyway, so this the only positive thing is that at least they chose somebody Arab to play this. But this is a representation of the oversexed, very rich Arab, right?
That's the first time I took an order by phone. I'm sorry to understand you.
When I called you, I was doing 140 miles an hour. That was 6 lamb burgers, 4 shish kebabs, a side order of couscous, and 2 milk. Look, how much?
$6.75.
Here, my desert blossom. Give the change. Have you ever considered joining a harem? I shall return for you after the race. Take it physical. I shall return my little thing.
So you notice some of the things he said. You know, you get physical. He gives her some money. Asks her if she's ever considered joining a harem. This is a guy who's so rich, has no idea what to do with his money, and that's just a stereotype. So that was one of them. Some other ones, you watch like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Remember that famous scene when Harrison Ford is there and there's this Arab trying to do the sword and then he shoots him. Again, it's comic relief and stuff like that. That's what it was for a long time. I think there are three incidents that really inform our understanding of Arabs. I think one of them is the oil embargo in '73. There's the Israel-Palestine conflict, ongoing conflict, and of course there's Iran and what's going on there. Even though Iran is not Arab, but again, they lump them in with the Arab just because they're Muslims. Let's say Middle Eastern. The three things that inform our understanding of the Middle East, and those are the three things. So after we move from the exotic, and then we go to the very rich buffoon kind of representation, we finally get into terrorism. And this is something that, I got a couple of stories for you about this. I think there's a danger when we keep seeing these movies that have terrorists in them, because I think it strips of entire people of their humanity. And all of a sudden people see Arabs and Middle Easterners as just terrorists, and there's nothing else. I produced a play a number of years ago called 16 Wounded that had to do with Israelis and Palestinians, something that I'm very passionate about. Both my parents are Palestinian. My mother lived in a refugee camp for 16 years. And so this is something I've been passionate about. I always like to speak about. So we produced this play, and we said we want to do this play, and we want to have a conversation after every single performance. We're going to get a lot of guest speakers. We got everything from imams to rabbis to activists. They just really talk about the situation. And in one of the talkbacks, we were talking about terrorists, and I said, I want to make a point clear. I've lived in Jordan for 17 years, and then I lived in Beirut for 2. And so, which means I've known a lot of Arabs in my life, and my entire family is Arab. I have a very large family. And you go through all these years of school, so I have met hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Arabs. Not once in my entire life have I ever known I've ever met a terrorist. And I just wanted to make that very clear. So then we moved on to the conversation, and later on somebody goes, like, I know you said you don't know many terrorists. So I said, no, I didn't say, I said any. I have never, ever met one in my entire life. But that's the stereotype that we have in our heads. And I think because that's all we see, is all we see in movies, in TV, on the radio, on the news. I mean, Oklahoma City bombing, for instance. When that happened, everybody was saying this has Middle Eastern terrorism written all over us. Actually, we were just talking at dinner today. Edward Said, who is one of my favorite writers, told the story one time in an interview when he was in Canada when Oklahoma City happened. And he had been calling his office to see if there are any messages for him, just something that he routinely does. And he said there were, his secretary said, yes, many, many calls came from me from all over the place, all sorts of networks, calling. And he said, why are they calling me? He said, they want you to comment on this. And he said, well, that was offensive on 2 fronts. One, why are they assuming it's Middle Eastern calling me? And 2, I'm an academic. Why are they calling me to talk about terrorism? I don't know anything about this. Just because I'm an Arab, they're calling me to say, well, you're Arab, you know this. Go ahead and speak about it. So that's it. So I want to show an example of something in film. This is as extreme as it gets, I think. Okay, this is to me, it's kind of funny, it's kind of crazy, but you'll see what I mean. I don't know if any of you are fans of Arnold Schwarzenegger or not. I gotta admit, there are a couple of movies that I really like, that I really like. But check this one out. This is from True Lies. Right? This is as ridiculous as it gets, in my opinion. Look at him. He's Asian. He's not even Arab. By the way, really, really quickly, I want to say that if you watch these movies, you think think that Arabs just go around all the time yelling yalla, 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 which means come on, as if we're always in a hurry. We're really laid back people, but if you watch this, you think we're always in a hurry because every movie there is with Arabs in it, they're going yalla, yalla, yalla. It's like the only word they know. Anyway.
Please stop coming any closer! Help me! Help me! Somebody!
So, one thing I want to point out here is that there's always fear of somebody is one thing, right? You fear for yourself from somebody else's differently. But when that person attacks your daughter, that's a whole other level of fear. You know, I've really noticed that in the past year because I have a daughter now, and you know, she's 11 months old. And yes, I will throw myself in front of a train for that little girl. So it's a whole other thing. And here they really exploit that. It's the white daughter being chased by a brown terrorist. So this is not coincidental. So I want to just, there's...
Before you go on.
Yes, go ahead.
Does it strike you at all that the saving grace is this $500 million aircraft?
Well, obviously, it's one thing that we do very well here in the States is aircraft, war aircraft. So yes, I mean, it strikes me as normal. I mean, this is when football games. What happens before every football game, right? Aside from the national anthem, airplanes, war airplanes going past. I mean, we're very proud of that. So that's something that they very much here. This is how we're going to do this. We're going to save the day by going in with war airplanes and blowing everything up. So, and on that point, I'm going to play the continuation of that clip because it really gets to something that you just said. So this, the ridiculousness continues here. So at the end, he shoots at the flag all over business. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's your governor right there. So this clip. I mean, there's so much loss of life. So it says that these people's lives are inconsequential. We're just going to kill them all. So that's one thing it does. So it really perpetuates that stereotype that there is no humanity here. Everybody here that looks like that is a terrorist. The other thing that it gets at is that it doesn't really hire any Arabs to play these parts. I mean, that main guy is Pakistani, and if for people who understand Arabic will immediately know that his Arabic is terrible. So you know, okay, he's not. So I looked it up, and he is from Pakistan. But you know, brown, come play Arab. So I lived in New York for a little while, and I did a little bit of acting. And in full disclosure, I went there, you know, jokingly. I always said, I'm going there to exploit my ethnicity. I want the money. And whatever it takes, you want me to blow some people up, let's do it, right? So I went, and I even went and I got my headshots done. And So I grew a mustache and you know, a little bit of a beard here, and to look more ethnic there, you know, because I could pass for Italian sometimes. Like, no, I don't want to be Italian. I want the Arab, you know. I don't want to be the Mexican. I want to be the dangerous Arab, because that's where the money is. You know, after 9/11, it was like a cash cow for a lot of actors. So I went there to do that, and I got an agent, and every single audition they sent me on was, of course, foreign terrorists. And the more I did them, the more I just said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. It was just humiliating. The one I went, and I think what really did it for me, and I said I can't do this anymore, is there was a short film being made for Spike TV. And it was around Christmas time, and we said, hey, we're making this really edgy movie, and it's going to be about Osama bin Laden hijacking Christmas. You know? All right, you know, it's an audition. My agent sent me there. They handed me the script, and the script was I have Santa Claus tied up, and I kid you not, this is weird. Okay, so I have Santa Claus tied up, and I'm recording this message for a ransom. And I did that, and then he goes, do you speak Arabic? And I said, yes, I do. It's like, oh, great, and he hands me a script. It's like, do it in Arabic. And I look at it, and it's just nonsense, because Arabic is everything is connected, it's cursive, right? So, but the script that I had was just one letter after another, which means he just went to Google or something like that and just got something.
Yeah.
I said, this doesn't make any sense. That's not how you write Arabic. He goes, well, can you translate it? I said, all right, fine. And I'm sitting there translating it, and then in the middle of it, I just paused, like, nah, I can't do this anymore. And I just walked out. And then I walked out, and he actually did want to prove his point, and he sent me the final product with another actor. So like, see what you're missing out on? Okay, fine. Anyway,
You should have translated it, but done like some guerrilla warfare. Put your own messages in there.
That's true. I could have done that. It's like,
Anyone can know.
this director is so horrible. Never hire him again. He eats puppies for breakfast. I should have done that. Yeah, exactly. But those were the sort of things that I was always being sent on, and it's really, really hard to find humanity in Middle Easterners, I think, in American films. Every once in a while it does happen, but not often. One of the things, Rules of Engagement. Anybody seen that movie? Samuel L. Jackson, right? So Samuel L. Jackson is a Marine in it, and it takes place in Yemen. And Tommy Lee Jones plays his lawyer, and there was a massacre that happened when the Marines massacred all these Yemeni people. And Tommy Lee Jones is really investigating this, and he meets this little girl on crutches, and so you all of a sudden you start to empathize with people from Yemen, the Yemeni people, and the more he digs in, the more he finds out that the Marines really did commit a massacre and killed all these innocent people. But then the twist happens where you see, like, no, not really. What happened was these Yemeni were the ones who shot first. So they're not really that innocent. And one very iconic picture when you see the little girl, just like 6, 7 years old, with a gun pointing up at a Marine. And then, of course, it's Samuel L. Jackson, so he has to have this iconic, phrase, which at that time was, waste the motherfuckers. So, but that's the thing that once you start to empathize with people, they take it right back and say, nope, can't empathize with them. They're all bad. So you see that a lot, but every once in a while you see something really positive. If you've seen Three Kings, an amazing movie, absolutely wonderful movie. It's about the first Iraq War, and you really see multiple sides to a very difficult situation, which is fantastic. Syriana is another one where you see just an aspect of Arabs that you haven't seen before. So these are far and few in between. The best thing, for me at least, I teach Middle Eastern film at a community college in Edmonds. But I concentrate on the films coming out of the Middle East. And that's the best way to see these. And these are really good movies. A lot of the ones I show are nominated for Oscars. The ones that I specialize in are Israeli and Palestinian films. There's some terrific stuff coming out of Israel and Palestine right now. Saudi Arabia just did an amazing movie called Wajda, with a woman director, no less. A woman directed a movie in Saudi Arabia. Now, she had to direct it, and I keep it out from inside of a van because she couldn't be seen outside with men. So she had to be in the van with the monitor there while the cameras are outside the van while she's shooting the movie. But again, progress. It's an incredible movie. It's a beautiful movie about a little girl that just wants to ride a bicycle. So there's something like that. Jordan is producing some decent films as well. Iran, from the Middle East. I mean, it's just some really terrific stuff coming out of there. So if you really want to understand the nuances of the Middle East, especially right now, what's going on is horrific. I mean, in the Middle East, I was reading an article this morning that's saying that Arab civilization is just gone, and it will take a long time for it to recover, probably not in our lifetime. And it's really depressing to hear about that. But there's so much to it, and if you really want to understand it, and you want to understand it through a very accessible medium, that's film. And Netflix, by the way, has tons of movies from these countries. If you just go to Netflix and you type Egypt or Israel, Palestine, you'll see a lot of great things. Oh, just every year, just look at the foreign language films that get nominated for Oscars. Every once in a while, they're going to get Israel or Palestine from there or something else. Omar is the latest one from Palestine, which is phenomenal, by the way. I highly recommend it. Omar, O-M-A-R. That's just the latest one that just came out, and I think it's incredible. I can give you a whole list of great movies to see for the Middle East, but I think that's a really good way to access that because you're not going to really see it a whole lot from Hollywood. Every once in a while it will happen, but not a whole lot. TV, there's a show right now, The Tyrants, that's fictional Iraq really, and it's about a prince who comes back from the United States to Iraq to assume the throne, and it's okay, it's not bad, but the good thing about it, they actually hired Arab writers to help with the writing, and that's my main thing. I said Arab actors is one thing, but Arab writers, that's where you need it. If you're going to direct an Arab film or something, just get Arab writers in there, or for TV, because they will really help you. And if it's a comedy, I promise you it will be funnier if you hire Arab writers in there. I mean, anybody see The Dictator?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe 2 good jokes in there. We could have had at least 15 if they had an Arab writer.
I'm curious if you've ever seen a film called The Siege,
Oh yeah.
and what your thoughts were, because watching that, and if y'all are familiar, the film that came out summer of 2001,
Been a while since, yeah.
about a terrorist attack on New York where they shut down New York.
Right,
It was ridiculously depressing. And they basically put the Arab and Muslim population of New York into internment camps. And the movie, a lot of the movie comes down to whether or not you can torture people. And it's a disturbing film because it happened before 9/11, but it is absolutely on the ball. But what I was curious about was Tony Shalhoub's character, who's the translator, and the way that his own family is put in an internment camp, even though he's an FBI Arab translator. But I was curious to your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, it's a frightening movie for anybody who was Arab that something like this could happen. Of course, it did happen before to the Japanese, so I'm sure they could identify with that. But there's, the thing about Tony Shalhoub's character there, he is defined as the good Arab, right? He is the good one. So, and this is something that sometimes I get in conversations with people, because I always say, if you really want to know what an Arab is like, you're talking to one. I lived there for half my life, and I grew up there, and I don't want to hurt anybody and stuff like that. And I get to, but you're one of the good ones. And that's kind of offensive in a way, because you're assuming that everybody's bad, and there's a handful of them that are okay. Instead of assuming, the other way around. So he's the good Arab in that movie, and so my thoughts on that is just that it's good to show that there is some goodness. At least there's one of them. But at the same time, it's kind of weird to say like, yeah, everybody's bad, but there's a handful of you that are okay. A good movie though. I mean, it really was. It was a well-produced movie. It had a frightening situation where all these people get rounded up. And when 9/11 happened, yeah, we really thought this was a possibility. I'll mention this about the danger of seeing this kind of stereotype again and again and again. 3 things happened to me in the week after 9/11. So I was in Delaware at that point going to grad school. So I don't think anything really rattled me as much as that 9/11. And it wasn't because I'm Arab or anything like that. It rattled me because it was an attack on my adopted home country, which is the United States. Because when I came here, just like I would guarantee you the vast majority of people who come to this country from other countries, because we want to be. Not here to destroy anything. We're here because we want to live. We want to have a good time. If you go to a mall, for instance, you're going to see a lot of diversity. You know why? Because that's how we assimilate. We want to be part of the people. So what do? We go shop. That's what people, that's what Americans do. Let's go do it too. Because we want to be here. We want to be a part of this community. So that's why 9/11 rattled me more than anything else. But three things happened. The second or third day, I saw a pickup van or truck. He was just driving around, and he had painted on the back window, "Nuke 'em all." So he had to take a left turn, get away from that guy. Don't want to get anywhere near him. But that was one thing that just kind of shook me up. It's like nuke and all, nuke them all, right? So that's, it really gave me pause. The second thing is my mom calls and she goes, like, I'm really scared right now. They live in upstate New York. She said, somebody chased your father today, calling you effing Arab, and chased him down. And so your dad just got in the car and got away. So my dad came home and shaved his mustache, something that he never does. I've never known my dad to have a mustache my entire life. But he did that because he doesn't want to be recognized as Arab at that point. And my mom going, what can we do? I said, just put an American flag up, put it outside the window right now. Just maybe that's a thing that kind of tells people to chill out. And the third thing, which I think really rattled me the most, was in the apartment building that I lived in, there was this Muslim Arab family. And I used to see them outside. They had their kid just playing on the lawn and stuff like that. And they were a devout Muslim family. The woman had a hijab and everything. And she was out there playing with her son, and she didn't have that on. And it takes a lot for a Muslim woman, a devout Muslim woman, to take that off in public, because that's just forbidden. So when I saw that, it just kind of dawned on me, it's like, wow, the people are going to extraordinary lengths to not be associated with Arabs. I started calling myself Zach. Just because I didn't know what to do. I mean, it was really frightening. Because, and again, it's because of that stereotype that perpetuates. We see them day in and day out on TV, on the news. So that's the stigma that you carry on. And it's exhausting. I mean, it's exhausting to be the model Arab. You can't slip. You can't do anything because they say, like, see, because you always have to be absolutely perfect at all times. And so it's just exhausting sometimes. So sometimes you just want to get away with it. You call yourself something else. You start acting differently. Anyway, that's I just want to say that's kind of to me the danger of that perpetuation of that stereotype. Anyway. Cool. Yeah.
Thanks, Zach. Does anybody have any questions? This seems like a pretty interesting subject to ask questions about.
Just some comments that about the films and the portrayal of Arab. It reminds me, and not making a distinction, you can have a Palestinian person or Egyptian. In the late 90s, after Dirty Dancing, was made popular, there was a film, a Latino version of Dirty Dancing. I think it was called Salsa Nights. And I remember walking out of the movie theater after about a half hour or so, because they did the same thing, where you had this Puerto Rican couple speaking with a Cuban accent, going to a party in someone's backyard where there was a piñata. Now, a piñata is a Mexican, American tradition, and it was just, and they were supposed to be Mexicans, but they were dancing salsa, and it was horrible because it didn't matter. We're just this kind of conglomerate, right? And it sounds like this is what they are doing with Arab and Muslims, again, to not making that distinction. And I see that's the point that you're making is that's a dangerous point to make because it strips us, right, of our humanity, of our distinctiveness.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are 22 Arab countries, and so I grew up in Jordan, but if I meet somebody from Morocco, it might be actually very hard for us to communicate because the accent is so different that if we don't speak the original Arabic, we might not understand each other. So we're miles apart. I mean, we're different people. You know, Jordan is different than Palestine. It's different than Saudi Arabia, which is different. So all of that stuff, and you're right, we kind of get lumped in together as just like the Middle Eastern. And sometimes Israel gets lumped in there, and that's, you know, it couldn't be more different. Even though I say we're cousins, but which is horribly kind of true. But you know, you get lumped in together, and it's, there are so many nuances in there. The one thing I tell my students is that the most important thing to do, if you really want to understand the differences, and you really want to understand what's going on in the Middle East, it really comes as simple as know the difference between Sunni and Shia, and why did that rift happen? I mean, that goes all the way back to the 7th century. So if you understand how that rift happened and why, you would really understand what's going on in the Middle East. Because right now, with the Islamic State or ISIS or ISIL, whatever you want to call it, I mean, again, it goes back to the rift between Muslims, between Sunnis and Shias. And it's just, you know, if you know that difference, you'll understand a lot about what's happening there.
Yes, sir.
So, while Arabs have been stereotyped for a long time, it's post 9/11 that they moved into the prominent group to just, if you need a villain, let's just throw in some Arabs. Occasionally you can throw in Koreans now, but right now we're gonna focus on Arabs. Obviously 9/11 had a big part of that, but but in your own personal experience, are there other cultural things from the religious aspect to cultural to feminist issues to other things that are, in your own personal feelings, what allowed Arabs in that moment to really get pushed out to be our popular others? They're different than us. What is it that you feel that Americans look at you and what do you feel that they see?
I mean, again, it really is 9/11. I mean, you know, something like that happened pushes it really into the forefront. I mean, I have a friend of mine who's a comedian in New York called Dean Obeidallah. And Dean has a joke that he always tells. He says, on 9/10, I went to sleep American, 9/11, I woke up Arab. And so, and it's really true because that's, you know, I was just kind of like, oh, he's a foreigner, but he's fun, he's everything like that. And all of a sudden, 9/11, it's like, where do you come from, and all of that. So 9/11 really pushed that into the forefront. But of course, there are issues, and it's, especially with religion and especially with the treatment of women. I mean, my cause right now is feminism. And I think that really got pushed there once I had a daughter. I started seeing sexism in everything, like everything, right? Sexism, you know. But so of course, you know, with religion, yes, you know, I think Islam is. I mean, I grew up Muslim. I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form right now, but I grew up Muslim. I used to go to mass all the time. I don't like Islam's treatment of women. I abhor it. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I would argue with any Muslim that says it's not sexist, because it is. It's written right there in the Quran. I mean, when you look at the inheritance rules, when they say that the man gets twice as much as, you know, the son gets twice as much as the daughter when the dad dies, how is that not sexist? I mean, you kidding? But these issues are easy targets. That's the thing. They're easy targets for Hollywood. They're easy targets for TV, whatever.
And I think they're evolving. I think these discussions are being had in the Arab and Muslim world. I mean, just from limited knowledge. Yeah, I mean, I went to Morocco one time. It was my only experience with a Muslim nation. And at first had no idea what I got myself into. And then it was at the first sunset, hear the call to prayer immediately through the whole thing. But, you know, seeing my own first exposure to that, not knowing what to expect. I mean, women in Morocco, you saw everything from fully covered face head to toe to jeans and t-shirts or tank tops.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, so it's an evolving discussion.
Absolutely. In Jordan, it's you're going to go down and you'll see palms of life, and you're going to see the cafes and the restaurants and the bars where people are hanging out and everything is fine. And you're going to see the devout Muslim communities as well. They do this all mixed in together. So yes, people are having these conversations. So there's a lot of angles to every issue there, but it's easy to just say there's one issue and we're going to. It's lazy writing. It really is. It's just very lazy writing. It's not taking the time to see what other nuances are there and all the different angles. Yeah.
So how are you on a personal level? Because on a broad level, or even looking at film, we're talking about groups of people getting lumped together. So like on a personal level, and on a family level, how do you personally avoid that? Being able to still maintain part of your culture and separating the things that you don't like, but emphasizing those things as like you raise your own child, so that groups of people are lumped together and traditions are all lumped together. You know what I mean? Like, how do you differentiate that?
Yeah, it's a very good question because my daughter and what aspects of this culture I want her to have, and language is definitely important to me. I want to teach her Arabic. I talk to her Arabic to her all the time. But I mean, I think I'm lucky in several ways. And one of them is that I came here to the United States where I was able to speak my mind. When I came here, the first book I bought was the Satanic Verses, right? By Salman Rushdie, because it was banned in Jordan. I wanted to know what it was all about. I read it. I found out that I'm not a fan of Salman Rushdie. Not my cup of tea. But that's good. I have that freedom to express my thoughts, and I'm lucky in another way that my family, my parents, allow me to do that. They said, do whatever you want, and you don't need to hang on to anything that you don't want to hang on to, which is extraordinary because a lot of Arab families are kind of traditionalist. They want to hang on to that, and I really broke away from that in a lot of ways. I grew my hair really long. I got an ear. I still wear an earring all the time. That's my hair right now looks a lot better. Let me tell you. See pictures of me back then. Wow. So I kind of get to pick and choose, and my issues are really not with my immediate family, but just with the extended family, the ones that are still living in Jordan. But it's I am who I am, and I want to do what I want to do, and it's nobody's business. I really take a strong stand against that. But in terms of what I want to raise my daughter with, other than language, I don't know that there's much of it, because I see these values here too. Some people go, well, Arabs, the family values and everything. It's like, what? We don't have family values here in America? I mean, we do. I mean, it's this part of the beauty of this country. And it sounds really idealistic and naive, but it's true. It's a mixture of the entire world that comes together. And if you're able to find that, then you can find all the values that you need. You don't need to hang on to something from back home. And it's really kind of weird to say back home because that's not home. My home is here in the United States. It's Seattle. That's home. When I think of home, that's home. I was telling Lance today in the car. We were driving. I used to have this recurring nightmare, and it would be that I was back in Jordan and I was stuck and I couldn't come back to the States. And it was a real nightmare. I would wake up, sweating in real fears. And I said, that's kind of stopped about 7, 8 years ago. I haven't had that nightmare since. And I think that's a really good sign. It's a sign that that's it. I'm here for good. But it still makes me nervous every time, possibility of going back to Jordan. It's like, I don't know, man. What if I get stuck? Yeah.
What's the most progressive Arab country? Where, if you couldn't be in the United States, where
in terms of government or people?
Freedom, the ability to live the way you want to live.
Probably Jordan. Right now, I would have said Egypt for a while, but now Egypt's just a mess and a half. Egypt had a lot of freedoms. It had a booming film industry, theater. I mean, the music. It was the hub of arts and culture for a long time. But now it's terrible now in so many ways. But Jordan is still progressive, and I think that's because of King Abdullah. He really instituted some policies of, ironically, trying to give away power and do more elections there. It's still really, I mean, dirty politics. I mean, when you think of dirty politics, Jordan is filled with it, and the king is frustrated as anybody with it. But still, there you're not seeing the extremist groups. There's no Hamas, there's no Hezbollah, there's no Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, or there is, but they're very small. So Jordan's a very good place to go. Beirut, I mean, Lebanon for a long time was a wonderful place to be. I lived in Beirut right after the Civil War, and I still look at Beirut as probably the greatest city I've ever been in. I mean, I love Beirut with all my heart, and I was really young, but when I was there, but there's something just, it was magical about it, and you were able to do so much. I mean, the beautiful, the garden, the cafes, the beach, and life. But again, I was at the university, American University, so of course that was going to be there. But even here's a quick story for it. I got threatened for my life one time for wearing an earring. So I almost caused the Civil War, the second Civil War, because I was sitting in the middle of the university, some guy comes up to me and says, "Take off that earring or else I'm going to kill you." And he was dead serious, and he had a beard and everything, so I was like, I don't know who he was from. I said, all right, just chill out, take it out. Later on, I discovered he's from a political group called Harakat Amal, the Party of Hope. Okay? So it's a Shiite group, and I was really, scared. I was like, I got threatened for my life. And then I discovered that 3 other of my friends all had earrings, all men, and they also had, they actually went to their dorm room. I wasn't in the dorms, thank God. So I was in a building with a doorman. So they got threatened too, and it escalated from there. Also, some other political parties got involved because, like, the Jordanians, like, whoa, you can't threaten a Jordanian here. And Palestinians, like, whoa, he's originally Palestinian. You can't touch him. And all of a sudden, it's like all these different factions started kind of going at each other until finally my friend had enough and called the Jordanian embassy and said, we're being threatened for our lives here. And the ambassador called the head of their party and said, tell that student of yours to just back off. And it was a thing that went on for like a month. So there's still danger there. But to really answer your question, Jordan is a good place to be right now. For a foreigner, for an American, Dubai, Abu Dhabi is probably a very good place to be.
I meant as a citizen.
As a citizen?
As a citizen of the country.
I would say Jordan
is a place for Europeans or Americans to visit.
Yeah, I would say Jordan right now. Jordan is completely safe to go. There's great tourism. There's great stuff happening. And I don't think they're quite under any threat from like ISIS or anything like that, mainly because they're under protection of the United States. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I lived in Turkey when I was a kid, which is not Arab, but it's Muslim.
Right.
And Turkey is, in their constitution, women can't wear the burqa, and there's a lot of stuff that's built into kind of curb fundamentalism, but like, it's a Muslim country when America is a Christian country in the sense that it's the dominant religion, but it's not part of the constitution. And the Aegean coast of Turkey is just like Greece, but according to price. It's an amazing country.
It's a secular country, so even though their current prime minister is very religious and trying to kind of push the country in different ways.
It's just awesome to listen to you talk about this. Just, years ago, a lot of passion about it. It makes me more comfortable for talking about it. But I run into everybody, I feel like everybody's the same. I'm just that kind of person. Sort of like the way you're, quite like you're there right now. You fit in and you just take it all in. But I constantly run into people who, like a family member, it's like, those Asians, and it's like, what do you say to somebody like that? I mean, and I always say, well, what do you mean? You try to engage in questions, but, she makes the reference to they're all bad drivers. It's like, what are you talking about? How do you deal with that?
I mean, stereotypes have always going to be there. So it's the one thing I think about is, I ask, have you ever met?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Ask if you've ever met somebody. So if somebody says, those Asians, it's like, have you ever met one? Do you know somebody? Do you work with somebody like that? I mean, that's kind of the my answer all the time. Because usually if they do, I mean, I'll talk to you for myself. Say, have you ever met one? Well, you have now. This is what an Arab looks like. You know. Oh, and for Arabs also, I tell them to Google Arab Idol. Arab Idol.
Actually a show.
It's American Idol, but it takes place in Lebanon.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's a franchise, so you're gonna hear the same intro and everything. It's the same, you know, the way it looks and everything like that. And it's a brilliant show. I mean, it's just really good. So here's a story from Arab Idol. There was the guy who ended up winning was Palestinian. He was from Gaza. So Gaza is closed. So it's essentially an outpost. So he smuggled himself to Egypt to go audition, right? So he takes a long, long time until he finally gets there. And they had closed the doors and everything. He can't get in. And he calls his mom and he's like, I'm here, but I'm too late. And she said, well, can you get in anyway? It's like, it's just a wall. She looked like you smuggled yourself all the way to Egypt and you're going to let a wall get in the way? Just jump the wall. So he does. He jumps the wall. He goes in. But he doesn't have a number, you know, the number that they give you. And so he's like, what am I going to do? So he just starts belting out this song in the middle of the courtyard. A guy comes in, takes his number off, is like, you're amazing. I'm just there, you know, messing around, trying to get on TV, whatever. You should take my number. So he goes and he auditions and they love him and he moves on to the top 20 whatever and then the top 10 and then people just start falling in love with him. All over the Arab world are watching, falling in love with this young, very good-looking guy with an amazing voice. He's passionate. He's got a great story, you know. So he keeps going, and of course, he ends up winning. He wins Arab Idol, and and then he gets named as a peace ambassador to the UN.
Wow.
And, you know, he's doing all these concerts all around the world right now, and he's a peace ambassador. And when he accepted his speech, just talked about peace, and when he accepted, when he won the prize, just brilliant. And if you watch Arab Idol, they are just people who look just like us, except with a lot more makeup and bigger hair. Oh my God! The panelists, the women on the panels, the hair and the makeup is amazing.
So you're saying that everybody's just like everybody else? I mean, in a way.
There's a lot of differences. The cultural differences all over the place, but the thing is that it's the same. Everybody wants to have a good time. They want to have just have friends and family and love each other, and no matter what other nuances come in, that's essentially what it comes in. It's human. It's just, but there are differences. There are definitely cultural differences, and they have to be respected. But at the heart of it, we all want the same things. You know, this whole thing, death to America thing. That's for Hollywood. No, I've never met anybody say death to America. But says I want to be there. Because it's great. Because you can be here, or you can be behind barbed, wire right now. Fearing for your life from ISIS.
Well, there are problems too.
Well, of course, I'm not saying it's not.
It's funny, the irony of you having never met a terrorist in your life. I went to high school in the suburbs of Mobile, Alabama, and one of my classmates became a terrorist in Somalia one day. True story. Whole other thing. But anyway, we all have changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. Any other questions for Jackie or for Lance here? Good.
I feel like you guys have done a really good job of illustrating some of the pitfalls and dangers of trying to represent, trying to articulate someone else's identity for them. And I think that you pointed toward this, the obvious solution is that is maybe just you hand over the camera or you give them the pen or whatever medium it is that you're using, you give it away. Short of that, however, there are several media makers in the room. But if you find yourself in the position of either tasking yourself or being tasked with representing someone else's identity, are there strategies that can help you avoid those pitfalls? Can it be done well? And where are they?
Evidently it's extremely hard to avoid those pitfalls because there's so few examples where it's been avoided. Just one example of the last clip I showed was from Dancing Outside. it's a white director, it's a white author who directed the film, and yet there's a perspective there which is very penetrating to a certain kind of truth and it's confronting stereotypes such as like the white person who thinks he's progressive and sympathetic, and therefore you can just marry into a completely different culture and just fit in because he's got the right attitude about it, and that's something that's being made fun of in the film. And there were a lot of people who criticized W.P. Kinsella for the story. It's like, who are you to be telling this story? You know, you're not an Indian. You're not First Nations. And well, he in the end he could only do what everyone else who creates art can do, is pull out their poetic license, you know, and say I'm an artist, you know, and I study people. And the question is, I think, first the one to ask yourself is like, am I being honest here? You know, and what's my purpose? You know, is it am I trying to correct some great sin, and I think I can do it, or is it some guilt that's being worked out here or something? Is it I'm proving that I'm progressive? I mean, these are all potential pitfalls because they aren't getting right at the who is it I'm portraying on screen here. And in Hollywood history, the various others have been there to be obstacles in some quest or some goal that the hero is accomplishing. And they're there either for a body count or they're there for some sort of representation of the opposite of what the hero represents. To move past that, of course, is a wonderfully enormous step. But then there's the creation of human beings, which is what a great artist can do, no matter who or where you come from. But you have to be honest to yourself first, and then and if you can be honest to yourself, then what you can tell yourself is that there are things I don't know that I need to find out, and before I can say that I'm going to make that statement. So yeah, you have to live a lot, you have to write a lot, you have to observe a lot.
Sounds like there's a little humility involved as well, maybe.
Go through some awkward moments. Go through some awkward moments, maybe.
For sure.
Trying to approach these issues.
But I mean, research is a big thing of it when it comes to media. It is just doing the research that is needed for a story. I mean, it's about investigative journalism. And that's what you do, investigative.
I sure am.
You know, investigative journalism. But it's a lot of work, isn't it? I mean, it's a lot of work. It takes a long time. But that's the way to
And
get
what I
it.
mean by the awkward moments is that you will go into something not necessarily realizing that that a question is based upon a ridiculous assumption about other people or something you're not that familiar with. And so you can end up being humble. I mean, I had a lot of experience living abroad, and when I first started studying, there were all kinds of things from these greater issues we're talking about to just simply not understanding words. Like I remember walking into a kitchen and my host family in Costa Rica, and they're cooking a pot of beans on the stove, and I was very shy. I hardly said anything, so I was afraid of how bad my Spanish was, and I go up and I stare into the pot and I go, Willow Rico. And I was trying to say, this smells good. And what I said was, I smell good. And I walked out of the room, and that was all I said. So it's just this. It's a minefield in so many ways. A lot of people are so terrified of getting outside of their group, and I mean, you're talking about whether it's the Muslim world, which stretches from Morocco on the Atlantic coast to Indonesia, Latin America, from basically the United States to the tip of South America, not far from Antarctica, First Nations, all these groups, you know, it's a lot for people to digest.
It is. You really keep it an open mind and doing the kind of work that you need to do. It's really quick when something happens in the news and they need somebody, or they just, you know, they just have people just generalizing about this big thing that happened, and it's statements rather than questions.
Right.
And that's the thing. If you ask questions, that's you know, you're gonna get the good answers that you're seeking, and it's about asking questions. When I, you know, even a way, aside from this topic, in my work, when I want to do these events, the first thing I do is ask questions, because, except, you know, aside from this, everything I've done, I don't know anything about. So I asked. I mean, Yesenia's right here right now with us. She's going to be a panelist next month in a Think and Drink. So the first thing I did was say, what do you want to talk about? And why is this important to you? And, you know, so I'm asking these questions because I don't want to say, well, you're Latina, so, you know, tell us about this, you know, which is a lot of times you get in the media.
Yeah. Thank you.
Obviously, in every area where they make art, there's going to be writers, etc., who have one-dimensional characters that they don't spend a lot of time on. They throw in very basic things. So, what are, if you take a look at Europe films, how do they depict Americans? What are the stereotypes? How am I going to be characterized? And if I go over there, what are the people going to expect out of me? That's the dumbest thing that I can say, because it's going to confirm to them that I'm every stupid American thing that I can do.
Just, you know, carry a hamburger in your hand and walk around. But the funny thing is about films, really is the majority of the films do not involve the United States or Europe or anything like that. They're very local. They're talking about what's happening there in a local community. So there's not an obsession. I know here in America we really think that everybody cares about us, but the truth is, really, nobody does. You know, when you travel abroad, it's just yes, you're a country. Yes, there's stereotypes, but we're not going to spend all our time thinking about you. And that really doesn't, that kind of translates with films. All these films, they're not having that that stereotype, but they are stereotypes. Not that there aren't. So here's one of the story for you. So my cousin goes. He was born. Well, he was born in Saudi Arabia actually, but since he was 1 year old, he was living in the United States. So that's all he doesn't speak Arabic or anything like that. One time he was a teenager. I think he was like 19 or something. He comes to visit. Now my grandma and my grandpa at that time lived in this really poor Palestinian neighborhood, mostly from refugees that came from the West Bank. So he comes there and he'd never seen a guy like him before. He's got very curly hair, very, very long, and he's wearing these cut-off jean shorts. This is the 80s, all right? Okay, and a tie-dye t-shirt. And he's just like walking down the street, and the kids just couldn't believe what they were seeing, right? Like as if just, you know, something appeared out of, you know, magic. So they start walking after him, okay, clapping and going, Michael Jackson, Michael Jackson. You know, it was just like they've never seen this before to him. Like, hey, Michael Jackson just happened, really, man. But, you know, but that's the type. You know, somebody who looks a little different. He's got long hair. That's it. You know, he's got to be. So, you know, they're chasing after him, just like clapping Michael Jackson. But they're all these stereotypes, and a lot of them have to do with food. You know, just like the big obese American just having a burger under their hand. And, Texas is a big one. You know, cowboys. I'm a cowboy. You know, people like to make fun of that dialect a lot. So you have that. You have food. But it's really all in good fun. It really is, because when growing up, there was a very clear distinction between the government and the people. And everybody will tell you how much they hate the government, the American government. Oh, those damn Americans, stuff like that. They're like, hey, Mr. America's here! You know, it's just, it was always like that. It was really incredible. But because there was that distinction, that's all that is.
I think we're almost done, unless anyone has one more question or thought.
I had one. So now
I want to travel, and I'm a Mexican, a first generation Mexican American, and my question would be, how do you think they would react to hear my native tongue being spoken freely in an Arabic land?
Spanish, to speak in Spanish.
Yes.
There's a really, it's really complex because there's one part of it, there's such a camaraderie between other people of color, right? Growing up, if we saw somebody who was, Latin, or black, or, something like that, there was this immediate kind of connection because, like, we know what it's like. We see that here right now. I mean, when I see other people of color, it's immediate, like, yeah, we got something going over here. There's something that we recognize, and that translates over there too. But at the same time, there's incredible racism that happens there, and it's internal racism. Like whether Saudi Arabia hates people from Yemen or Kuwait or something like that, and there's a lot of that racism. We had that also in Jordan, where a lot of people would treat Egyptian migrant workers really, really badly. Very similar to also thoughts that some people here treat, migrant workers from Mexico or something like that. So there's that, it's complex. You have that racism, but at the same time, there's that kind of camaraderie. But I think, going there, I think they will very much identify with you. Why? Because the United States treats Mexico badly, or treats people from Mexico badly. So I think there's going to be that instant camaraderie of, hey, me and you, we both have America hating us. Right. That's kind of like the attitude that kind of comes through. I think you'll,
yeah. So do you think that'd be more easily accepted into their households and to be able to access their private life? Because ultimately, when I travel, I want to turn the camera not on my experience,
absolutely,
being in these third world countries or different cultures, and turning the camera towards them and following a family.
Are you going there, do you think, like as a journalist?
No.
Or as you just like a regular person kind of going to understand it?
No, my point of view is to give access to people around the world on the World Wide Web, access to see the life of a Russian, the life of a Japanese, the life of a Chinese, the life of an Arab. And me being the example of growing up in this country, in this county, growing up in this city and in the Lower Valley, experiencing what I experienced, but then coming out of that and turning my tools, what I've learned, what I've accessed, and just pointing it back to the viewer. So basically just highlighting the everyday Joe is what I want. So like basically it's like, do you think being able to will I be able to access that?
I think so, because people want to tell their side of the story, always. So I think there's always, people are welcome if they're there to listen. Because they're exactly what we talked about all evening, that kind of stereotype. If the family can tell a different point of view, they will be very forthcoming with it. And I can't speak also for all Arabs. I can speak a lot about Jordan because that's what I know the most and where I grew up. There's always people wanting to tell their story and say who they are, what they went through, and that they're not who the rest of the world, especially the Western world, thinks of. So absolutely, I think they'll be accepted with open arms from a lot of people because they want to tell their story so badly. Not a whole lot of people ask questions. So sometimes when people ask questions, like, oh, you actually want to know? All right, let me tell you.
Part of it's the luck of the draw too. I think whether you're in this country or another country, some people, just as a journalist, some people want to talk to you, other people don't want to talk to you. Some people look at you and judge you, other people don't. And you just have to have that person-to-person mentality. Anyone else?
A quick observation that based on my history and I'm a sort of aficionado of group singers from the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, and Boys Town in Hollywood. Most of which were all Jewish, and depicting a lot of Disney stereotypes through their voice.
Oh yeah.
And it's just an interesting thing I just thought about.
There's a lot of cartoons that depict Jew, it's a stereotypical Jew, the kind of dialect, and it's not just in voice, it was also,
But they were hired as character actors in radio and Disney films to depict a lot of different races. It's just an interesting thing. That was
yeah, no, they're all.
Yeah, we touched on it earlier, we had Native American actors
who would be.
Yeah, as long as they were playing the stereotypes that they had jobs, and all different kinds, yeah. And there was even an additional stereotype added to Jews working in Hollywood was that they could play anybody, right? So that was their special skill, was assimilating, right? So therefore they could have a chameleon-like nature, which worked great for the job.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So why? I just have to ask why. I mean, some of the most talented singers and voice actors I've ever met, and they're friends of mine, some of my dearest friends, are in their late 80s, early 90s, retired Hollywood voice talent, and they're all Jewish, and they did all the work. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, of course, why, but why did the industry focus so much on fostering those horrible stereotypes forever and ever and ever, decades?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about...
Were those actors not able to land leading roles? I mean, did they have to?
Oh, they were the busiest singers in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Busiest, I mean, they did...
For their voice.
For their voices. But they were really good at depicting a really stereotypical sound.
Yeah, Hollywood has a very bizarre relationship with Jewish people, and they're inseparable. Really, you could say that Hollywood exists because of Jewish immigrants moving to the East Coast for decades, and then creating an industry that was. It was a new possibility, a new industry. It was an industry for its early years. It was probably a lot like the dot-com boom in the 90s. You could be anybody. You could walk in, and if you had talent, if you had skill, and you knew what worked, you could rise up the ranks really, really fast. And a lot of people who became Hollywood moguls, many of whom were Jewish, started by running these arcades in the East Coast, and many times in ghettos, where they just showed individual films that cost a nickel, and you looked a little peephole, and the films were nothing. And these people said, we can make better films than this, and make things more interesting. And many of these names, with names like Zukor and Mayer, they got funding and started making their own movies. And then they said, we can make movies year round if we buy up some orange groves in Southern California and build lots there. And
that was 47. It was 1947. Right after.
Yeah, and
gas prices went down.
But the conflict always was that Hollywood was a great place for people who are escaping from Europe, people of great talent, both in a business sense and an artistic sense. They found in this industry that was still really struggling in the early years to get respectability, because a lot of people passed it off as a gimmick, novelty, not an art form by any means. But people were coming to these shores who were happy to be alive, and were not going to be snobs about where they worked. Because they were very happy to have a job and be alive, and they took these jobs and created Hollywood in a lot of ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, you could say that what historians call the golden era of Hollywood, which is the period you're also talking about here, is the arrival of so many emigres from place war-torn and places and where fascism was rising in Eastern Europe. They come over here, and then that period begins just a huge surge of creativity on all cylinders firing, in Hollywood. And then the end of that, you could say, is the McCarthy era, when that purge, an American form of that kind of purge takes place in this country, and a bunch of people leave this country and go work in Europe, which is suddenly more progressive than the United States. So what a lot of the Hollywood people were at pains to do is create jobs and show their worth to America in this new American industry, while also really downplaying their own ethnicity and sort of concealing this highbiness.
Down to hair color, down to everything.
Yeah. In the 1930s, it wasn't clear whether the United States was going to follow fascism, or communism. But the 20s, 30s is a lot of extremes in the world, and there was a big question. And the people who were just had a little foothold in Hollywood, were not about to, throw this over. So,
Well, thank you all very much for being here. Thank you very much for moderating.
This October 15th, we'll be back again talking about music and identity, especially with the Latino tradition. So I hope you can join us then as well. And October 9th, Lance is going to be at Sunnyside Library.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is, I hope this is open to the public, that Heritage University in the afternoon.
I think it is, yeah.
So I'll be at Heritage University on the afternoon of the 9th, and then in the evening of the 9th, I'll be at Sunnyside Library with the American Indians in Cinema talk, and it's a presentation where I'll go into more depth of the material when it's hope you can make it, or please let people know who might be interested.
Thank you all very much for being here.
Yeah.